Hey everyone, and welcome back to Lily's podcast. I'm Lily, your host, and I'm absolutely thrilled you're here with me today. Before we jump into today's incredible episode, I just want to say a huge thank you for being part of this journey with me and our amazing community. If you're enjoying this podcast and finding it helpful for improving your English communication skills, please take a moment to share it with your friends and family. Hit that share button and let others know about what we're building here together. Your word-of-mouth support means everything to us and helps our podcast reach more people who want to master English fluency. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode. New episodes drop regularly, and each one is packed with practical strategies, real-life conversations, and techniques to help you speak English more confidently and naturally. When you subscribe, you'll be notified instantly whenever fresh content is available, so you won't miss out on any of our transformative lessons. And here's something really special I want to tell you about. Make sure to check out our podcast playlist on our channel. This playlist contains all of our podcast episodes organized in a way that helps you progress systematically through different topics and difficulty levels. Whether you're a complete beginner or an advanced learner looking to refine your accent and speaking style, you'll find episodes perfectly suited to your current level in our playlist. It's like having a complete curriculum right at your fingertips, and I highly recommend browsing through it to find episodes that match your learning goals and interests. All right, now let's dive into today's episode, which is going to be absolutely transformative for your English speaking journey. So let's talk about the absolute foundation of speaking English confidently. When I started my own English journey years ago, I realized that most people struggle not because they don't know vocabulary or grammar rules, but because they're afraid to actually use the language in real-world situations. Today, I want to help you overcome that fear and build a solid foundation for speaking English naturally. When you're beginning your English speaking journey, the very first thing you need to understand is that perfection is not your goal. Your goal is communication. You need to focus on expressing your thoughts, feelings, and ideas in a way that other people can understand. Even if you make mistakes with grammar or pronunciation, as long as your message comes across clearly, you've succeeded in communication. Let me share something from my own experience. When I first started speaking English with native speakers, I was absolutely terrified. I would rehearse sentences in my head multiple times before saying them out loud. I would worry constantly about whether I was pronouncing words correctly or using the right tense. But then I realized something crucial. Every native English speaker I talked to was patient and genuinely interested in understanding what I was trying to say, not in judging my grammar. This realization changed everything for me. I stopped focusing on being perfect and started focusing on being clear and consistent. And that's what I want to share with you today. Let's start with the most basic, everyday phrases that you'll use constantly in real conversations. The very first thing you need to master is how to greet people properly and respond to greetings. In English, when someone says, "Hello, how are you?" this is actually a greeting question, and the person is asking how you're doing emotionally and physically. Now, you can give a simple answer like, "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" But in reality, most native speakers will just say, "Good, thanks," or "I'm doing well," and then ask back immediately. Let me teach you the nuances of this exchange. When someone asks, "How are you?" they're not necessarily asking for a detailed answer about your entire life story. They want a quick, simple response. So you could say, "I'm great, thanks for asking," or "I'm doing pretty well, how about you?" The key is to keep it short and natural sounding. Another greeting you'll hear frequently is, "What's up?" This is a very casual, friendly greeting that literally means the same thing as "How are you?" but it's much more relaxed and informal. If someone says "What's up" to you, you can respond with "Not much, just working," or "Hey, I'm doing well. How are you?" You don't need to overthink it. Now, let's talk about introducing yourself, which is something you'll do repeatedly throughout your life. When you meet someone new and want to introduce yourself, you can say several things. The most formal approach is, "Hello, my name is," your name. "It's very nice to meet you." But in more casual situations, you might just say, "Hi, I'm," your name. Or even simpler, "I'm," your name. After you've introduced yourself, the other person will typically introduce themselves too. Then you'll naturally say something like, "Nice to meet you too," or "Great, nice to meet you as well." This exchange is so fundamental to English speaking culture that I want you to practice it repeatedly until it feels natural to you. Let me give you a complete example of this introductory exchange. Person A says, "Hello, I'm Sarah. Nice to meet you." Person B responds, "Hi, Sarah. I'm Michael. Great to meet you too. How are you doing today?" Person A replies, "I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. How about you?" This simple exchange contains all the basic elements you need to start conversations with new people. One thing I've noticed many non-native English speakers struggle with is knowing what to say after the initial greetings. People ask, "How are you?" and you answer, and then there's this awkward silence. To avoid this, learn to ask follow-up questions. After someone asks how you are, you should ask them the same question back. Then you can ask about their day, their family, what they've been up to, or any current events in their life. For example, after exchanging initial greetings, you might ask, "What have you been up to lately?" Or, "How was your day?" Or, "Tell me about what you've been working on." These questions keep the conversation flowing naturally and show genuine interest in the other person, which is a core part of English-speaking culture. Now let's move to another fundamental aspect of beginner-level English speaking, expressing your basic needs and wants. In daily life, you'll frequently need to ask for things, request information, or tell people what you want to do. Learning how to do this politely is crucial. When you want something from someone, the most basic way to ask is simply, "Can I have," item, or "Can I get," item. For example, in a coffee shop, you might say, "Can I get a coffee, please?" Or, "Can I have a medium cappuccino?" The word "please" is absolutely essential because it makes your request polite and respectful. Another way to ask for something is using the phrase, "I would like." For example, "I would like a glass of water, please," or "I would like to order the chicken sandwich." This phrasing is slightly more formal than "can I have" and is often used in restaurants, shops, and formal settings. If you want to ask someone for help, you can say, "Can you help me?" Or, "Could you help me with this?" The word "please" is important here too. You might say, "Can you help me carry this? It's quite heavy." Or, "Could you help me understand this problem?" These phrases show respect and politeness. Let me teach you about asking for directions, which is a practical skill you'll definitely use when traveling or exploring new places. If you're lost, you can stop someone and say, "Excuse me, can you help me? I'm looking for the train station." Or, "Do you know where the library is?" Or, even simpler, "Where is the nearest supermarket?" When someone helps you by giving you directions, it's important to thank them. You should say, "Thank you very much," or "Thank you so much," or even just, "Thanks, I appreciate that." This politeness is truly valued in English-speaking cultures. Now, let's discuss how to talk about your daily routines, which is something you'll do constantly when chatting with friends, family, and colleagues. Everyone wants to know what you do with your time, so being able to describe your daily routine clearly is essential. Your daily routine probably starts with waking up. You can say, I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, or I usually get up around 6:30. The word usually is helpful because not every day is exactly the same. Then you might say, I take a shower and I brush my teeth. These are basic actions you do every day. After your morning hygiene routine, you probably eat breakfast. You can say, I eat breakfast at 8 o'clock, or I have breakfast before I leave for work. When describing what you eat, you might say, I eat toast with butter and jam, or I have cereal with milk, or I drink coffee and eat a sandwich. Then comes the part where you need to get to work or school. You might say, I take the bus to work, or I drive my car to the office, or I walk to my university. These transportation methods are common things to mention in your routine. At work or school, your day is structured by different tasks and activities. You can say, I start work at 9 in the morning, or my classes begin at 10 o'clock. Then you describe what you do, such as, I sit at my desk and answer emails, or I attend meetings with my team, or I study mathematics and English. An important part of your day is lunch. You can say, I take a break for lunch at noon, or I eat lunch around 1 o'clock. You can describe where you eat. I eat lunch at my desk, or I go to a cafe for lunch, or I bring my lunch from home. The afternoon is often when people feel tired and less productive. You might say, in the afternoon, I feel a bit tired, or I work on creative projects in the afternoon because I'm more alert in the morning. Everyone has their own rhythm of when they work best. Finally, work or school ends. You might say, I finish work at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or my classes end at 4 in the afternoon. Then you go home and you can describe what you do. I cook dinner for my family, or I relax and watch television, or I exercise at the gym. Evening activities are important to mention because they show what you enjoy doing in your free time. You might say, in the evening, I read books, or I spend time with my family, or I watch movies online. These activities reveal your personality and interests. Finally, you go to bed. You can say, I go to sleep at 10 o'clock, or I usually go to bed around 11 at night. You might say, I read in bed before sleeping, or I use my phone before I sleep, which are very common habits nowadays. The key to describing your routine is using time markers, like in the morning, at noon, in the afternoon, in the evening, and at night. These help structure your description and make it easy for listeners to follow. Now that we've covered the absolute basics, let's move to the next level, where you start expanding your ability to talk about more complex ideas and situations. At this level, you're no longer just answering simple questions, you're actually telling stories and describing situations in more detail. One of the most important skills at this level is being able to describe people. When you talk about someone, you're not just saying their name and what they do for work. You're giving a fuller picture of who they are, what they look like, and what their personality is like. Let me teach you how to describe someone's appearance. You might start with their general build. My friend is tall, or she's a bit short, or he's average height. Then you can describe their hair. She has long, dark hair, or he has short, blonde hair, or they have curly red hair. Hair color and style tell a lot about someone. Moving on to facial features, you can say things like, he has a round face, or she has high cheekbones, or they have green eyes. You can also describe distinctive features, like he has a beard, or she has freckles, or they wear glasses. But appearance is just one aspect of describing someone. Much more importantly, you should be able to describe their personality traits. This is what really helps someone get a sense of who the person is. You might say, my sister is very friendly and outgoing, or My colleague is quiet but very intelligent. Or, my best friend is loyal and trustworthy. When describing someone's personality, you have many adjectives to choose from. You can say someone is kind, generous, funny, smart, creative, hardworking, honest, reliable, patient, confident, or independent. Or you might say someone is shy, anxious, stubborn, impatient, or overly critical. The right adjectives paint a clear picture. I remember when I was learning English, I realized that describing people's personalities was actually more interesting than describing their physical appearance. That's because personality tells you how someone will treat you, how they'll react in certain situations, and what kind of relationship you can have with them. Let me share how to construct full sentences about someone's personality. You might say, "My best friend David is incredibly kind and always helps people in need." Or, "My mother is very organized and she likes everything to be clean and orderly." Or, "My boss is fair but also very demanding when it comes to work quality." Notice how these sentences start with who you're talking about, then describe their main characteristics, and sometimes add context about how this affects their behavior. This structure helps you give a complete picture of someone's character. Another important skill at this level is describing places. Whether you're talking about your home, your city, a restaurant you visited, or a beautiful natural landscape, describing places clearly helps others visualize where you are or where you've been. When describing a place, you typically start with its general characteristics. Is it big or small? Is it busy or peaceful? Is it modern or old? For example, you might say, "The beach near my city is absolutely beautiful. It's not too crowded, and there's a nice breeze from the ocean." Or, "My apartment is small but comfortable. It has 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom." Then you can add specific details. "The kitchen in my house has white cabinets and granite countertops." Or, "The park in my neighborhood has tall trees, green grass, and a playground for children." These specific details make your description come alive. One thing I learned is that sensory descriptions are really powerful when describing places. Don't just say what something looks like. Talk about what you can hear, smell, and feel. You might say, "The cafe smells amazing because of all the fresh coffee brewing." Or, "The forest is quiet except for the sound of birds singing." Or, "The beach feels warm when the sun is shining directly on your skin." Another skill to develop at this level is talking about your interests and hobbies. People want to know what you like to do in your free time because it tells them what kind of person you are and what you're passionate about. You can simply say, "I love playing soccer," or "I enjoy reading books," or "I'm interested in photography." But to make it more engaging, you should explain why you enjoy these activities. You might say, "I love playing soccer because it keeps me fit, and I love the feeling of being part of a team." Or, "I enjoy reading because it allows me to escape into different worlds and learn about different perspectives." When talking about hobbies, it's helpful to mention how much time you spend on them. You might say, "I play guitar for about an hour every day," or "I go hiking on weekends when the weather is good," or "I spend most of my free time drawing and painting." You can also talk about why you started enjoying these hobbies. "I got interested in cooking because my grandmother taught me her traditional recipes." Or, "I started playing music when I was 5 years old, and I've been doing it ever since." Or, "I got into gardening during the pandemic because I wanted to grow my own vegetables." As you get more comfortable at this level, you'll want to talk about past experiences. This requires you to use past tense more confidently, not just in answers, but in telling full stories about things that happened. Let me teach you how to tell a story about something that happened. You start by setting the scene. Last summer, I took a trip to the mountains with my family. Then you describe what happened. We drove for 6 hours to get there, and when we arrived, we were all very tired. Then you add specific details. We stayed in a small cabin near a lake, and the views were absolutely breathtaking. As you tell your story, include your feelings and reactions. I was excited, but also a bit nervous because I had never hiked at that altitude before. Or, I felt amazed when I saw the sunrise from the mountain peak. These emotional descriptions make your story engaging and relatable. At the end of your story, you might reflect on what you learned or how it made you feel. That trip taught me that spending time in nature is really good for my mental health. Or, it was one of the best experiences of my life because I got to spend quality time with my family. Another crucial skill at this level is asking follow-up questions during conversations. This shows that you're genuinely interested in what the other person is saying, and it keeps conversations flowing naturally. If someone tells you they went on vacation, you don't just say, "That's nice," and change the subject. Instead, ask questions like, "Where did you go? How long were you there? What was your favorite part? Did you try the local food?" These questions show interest and keep the conversation going. Similarly, if someone tells you they started a new job, ask, "What kind of work do you do? How are you liking it so far? What's the most challenging part?" These follow-up questions demonstrate genuine curiosity and help build stronger connections with people. Welcome to the intermediate level, where your English speaking becomes significantly more sophisticated. At this level, you're not just describing situations, you're analyzing them, explaining your reasoning, and engaging in more meaningful conversations. One critical skill at this level is using because, since, and as to explain your reasons and causes. These words help you explain not just what happened, but why it happened or why you feel a certain way. For example, instead of just saying, "I like my job," you can say, "I like my job because the work is meaningful and my colleagues are supportive." Or instead of, "I didn't sleep well," you can say, "I didn't sleep well because I was worried about my presentation the next day." When using these connecting words, you're showing logical thinking and helping others understand your perspective more fully. This is essential for more mature conversations. Another skill to develop is contrasting ideas using words like but, however, although, and even though. These words help you acknowledge different sides of an issue and show nuance in your thinking. For instance, you might say, "Although I enjoy my job, I sometimes feel overwhelmed by the workload." Or, "I love living in the city, but I miss the peace and quiet of small towns." Or, "Even though the movie was long, I found it absolutely captivating." These contrasting statements show that you understand complexity and can think about issues from multiple angles, which is a sign of more advanced English thinking. Let me talk about expressing opinions with confidence and politeness. At this level, you'll have conversations where you're asked for your opinion on various topics. It's important to express yourself clearly while still being respectful of other perspectives. You can start with phrases like, "In my opinion," "I believe," "I think," "From my perspective," or "In my view." Then state your opinion clearly. For example, "In my opinion, social media has both positive and negative effects on society." Or, "I believe that education is the foundation for personal and professional growth." But here's the key. After stating your opinion, you should support it with reasoning. You might say, "I believe that education is crucial because it provides people with the skills and knowledge they need to succeed in life." Or, "In my opinion, regular exercise is important for overall health because it strengthens your body and improves your mental well-being." When someone disagrees with your opinion, you don't need to become defensive. Instead, you can acknowledge their point and politely explain your reasoning further. You might say, "I see what you mean, but I think the situation is more complex than that." Or, "That's an interesting perspective, and I understand why you think that, but I've had different experiences." This ability to discuss opinions respectfully is fundamental to engaging as an equal in English-speaking conversations. Now let's talk about conditional statements, which allow you to discuss hypothetical situations and their consequences. These are phrased using if, then constructions, though you don't always need to say then explicitly. For example, you might say, "If I win the lottery, I would travel around the world." Or, "If you don't water the plants, they will die." Or, "If I had studied harder, I would have passed the exam." Notice that the tense of the if clause affects the tense of the result clause. If you're talking about a possible future situation, you use if with present tense and then use will or would in the result. If you're talking about a hypothetical past situation that didn't happen, you use if with past perfect and then use would have in the result. Being able to use these conditional statements allows you to discuss possibilities, consequences, and counterfactuals, which enriches your conversational abilities considerably. Let's discuss how to ask for and give advice, which is something you'll do frequently in conversations. When you want someone's opinion or guidance, you might ask, "What do you think I should do?" Or, "Do you have any advice for me?" Or, "What would you do if you were in my situation?" When giving advice, you want to be supportive and helpful. You might say, "I think you should talk to your boss about your concerns." Or, "If I were you, I would take some time to think about it before making a decision." Or, "My advice would be to follow your heart and do what makes you happy." It's important to give advice with humility, recognizing that you don't have all the answers. You might say, "This is just my perspective, but I think," or, "I'm not sure if this will help, but you could try." This approach shows respect for the other person's autonomy while still offering guidance. One of the most important skills at the intermediate level is telling longer, more detailed stories. These aren't just simple recounts of events. They're narratives with a beginning, middle, end, emotional depth, and sometimes even a lesson or moral. A good story typically follows this structure. First, you set the scene and introduce the main characters. When I was 23 years old, I was working at a bank downtown. My colleague was named Robert, and he was new to the job but very enthusiastic. Then you introduce the problem or challenge. One day, a customer came in with a complicated banking issue. Robert was helping them, but he clearly didn't know how to solve the problem. I could see he was getting frustrated. Then you describe what happened. I decided to step in and help. Together, Robert and I worked through the issue step by step. It took about an hour, but we finally figured out a solution that made the customer happy. Then you add your reflection or the lesson learned. That experience taught me that asking for help when you need it is a sign of strength, not weakness. And helping a colleague succeed makes you feel much better than trying to be a hero on your own. Notice how this story has emotion, dialogue potential, and a meaningful conclusion. When you tell stories like this, people are much more engaged and interested in hearing what you have to say. Another skill at this level is talking about your plans and aspirations for the future. This shows that you're thinking ahead and have goals you're working toward. You might say, "Next year, I plan to take a course in digital marketing to advance my career." Or, "I'm saving money because I want to buy a house in the next 5 years." Or, "My dream is to travel to every continent before I turn 50. When discussing future plans, it's helpful to explain your motivation. Why do you want to achieve this goal? What will it mean for you? You might say, "I want to learn a new language because I believe it will open up new opportunities and help me connect with more people around the world." It's also important to talk about the steps you're taking to achieve your goals. To prepare for my trip, I'm researching different destinations and saving money every month. Or, to become fluent in English, I'm watching movies in English, reading books, and trying to speak with native speakers whenever possible. As you progress to the upper intermediate level, your ability to navigate complex social situations in English becomes crucial. You're no longer just practicing set phrases or basic conversation structures. You're engaging in nuanced, meaningful dialogue that requires cultural understanding and sophisticated language skills. One important skill at this level is understanding and using idiomatic expressions. These are phrases that don't make literal sense but are commonly used by native speakers. For example, when someone says, "I'm going to hit the hay," they don't literally mean they're going to hit hay with a stick. They mean they're going to sleep. Other common idioms include, "It's raining cats and dogs," which means it's raining very heavily. Or, "I'm feeling under the weather," which means you're feeling sick. Or, "She's a real go-getter," which means she's ambitious and hardworking. Learning these idioms is important because native speakers use them constantly in casual conversation, and if you don't understand them, you might be confused or miss the meaning of what people are saying. I recommend actively learning idioms and practicing using them in sentences so they become a natural part of your speech. You might create flashcards or keep a note on your phone where you write down idioms you come across and their meanings. Then practice using them in sentences until they feel natural. At this level, you're also developing the ability to have deeper conversations about abstract topics. You're no longer just talking about concrete things like what you ate for breakfast or where you work. You're discussing ideas, philosophies, and concepts. For instance, you might discuss what you think makes a person successful. I think true success isn't just about money or status. It's about feeling fulfilled in what you do and knowing that you're making a positive impact on people around you. Or you might discuss what you value most in friendships. I think loyalty and honesty are the most important things in friendship. I'd rather have one friend I can completely trust than 10 friends I'm not sure about. These kinds of abstract discussions require you to think about your values and beliefs and articulate them clearly in English. This is quite challenging, but also very rewarding because it allows you to have truly meaningful conversations. Another crucial skill is being able to handle disagreements gracefully in English. In any conversation, you're going to encounter people who don't agree with you. The ability to disagree respectfully without becoming defensive or rude is essential. When you disagree with someone, you can say things like, "I appreciate your perspective, but I see it differently." Or, "That's an interesting point, but I have to respectfully disagree." Or, "I understand where you're coming from, but my experience has been different." The key is to use phrases that acknowledge the other person's right to their opinion while still standing by yours. You might say, "I respect your opinion and I can see how you might think that, but based on what I've experienced, I think." It's also important to ask clarifying questions when you don't understand why someone holds a certain opinion. Can you explain why you think that? Or, what experiences have led you to that conclusion? These questions often lead to productive conversations where both people learn something new. Now let's talk about cultural differences in communication. Different cultures have different norms and expectations for conversation, and being aware of these can help you navigate English-speaking environments more successfully. In many English-speaking cultures, people value directness. They'll say what they mean fairly directly, but this doesn't mean they're being rude. It's just their communication style. In contrast, some cultures are more indirect, where you have to read between the lines to understand what someone means. Being aware of this difference can help you avoid misunderstandings. English-speaking cultures also tend to value humor and informality in many settings, even professional ones. You might hear a lot of jokes and casual banter in an office setting, and this is considered normal and friendly, not unprofessional. Additionally, in English-speaking cultures, there's often an expectation that you'll advocate for yourself. You're expected to speak up about your needs, ask for what you want, and defend your position when necessary. This might be different from your home culture, but understanding this expectation can help you navigate conversations more effectively. At this level, you're also refining your pronunciation and working on sounding more natural. This involves understanding stress patterns in English words and sentences. In English, words have stress patterns where certain syllables are pronounced more prominently than others. For example, the word present is stressed on the first syllable when it's a noun, present, but on the second syllable when it's a verb, present. These stress patterns can actually change the meaning of words, so it's important to get them right. Sentences also have stress patterns. Content words like nouns, verbs, and adjectives are usually stressed, while function words like articles, prepositions, and pronouns are usually not stressed. This gives English its characteristic rhythm and melody. When you practice speaking, pay attention to these stress patterns. Listen to how native speakers pronounce words and try to imitate their patterns. This will make your English sound much more natural and fluent. Another pronunciation element to work on is linking. English speakers often link words together so they flow smoothly. For example, did you is often pronounced like didja or didja, and want to is often pronounced like wanna. Understanding these linking patterns helps you both understand native speakers and sound more natural yourself. At this level, you should also be developing the ability to handle phone conversations and other situations where you can't see the other person. Without visual cues like facial expressions and body language, you need to rely more on tone of voice and your ability to listen carefully. When on the phone, it's important to be patient if you don't understand something. You can say, "Could you repeat that, please?" Or, "I didn't quite catch that." Could you say it again? Let me also talk about code switching, which is something many multilingual English speakers do. Code switching is when you use words or phrases from your native language within your English conversation. This is very common and completely natural among people who speak multiple languages. While code switching is normal and useful, especially when you're speaking with someone else who shares your native language, it's good to practice avoiding it when speaking with native English speakers or people who don't share your language. This forces you to expand your English vocabulary and express yourself entirely in English, which strengthens your language skills. As you continue developing your English skills, you'll inevitably encounter situations where you need to speak formally or professionally. This requires a different register of English, where you're more careful about grammar, less likely to use slang or idioms, and more formal in your tone. Professional English is used in business meetings, job interviews, formal presentations, academic discussions, and professional emails. While you want to maintain some personality and warmth, you need to be more careful about your word choices and tone. Let me teach you how to introduce yourself professionally. In a business setting, you might say, "Good morning. I'm Rachel Johnson, and I'm the project manager for the marketing team." This is more formal than a casual introduction because it includes your full name and your professional title or role. When meeting someone for business, it's also appropriate to shake their hand and make eye contact. These nonverbal elements are just as important as what you say in professional English. When presenting ideas in a professional setting, you want to be clear, organized, and confident. You might structure your presentation like this. I'd like to present 3 key points. First, we need to understand the market demand. Second, we should consider our budget constraints. Third, we must develop a realistic timeline. Notice how this structure makes it easy for your audience to follow your thinking. You're clearly outlining what you're going to say before you say it, which is a characteristic of effective professional communication. Another important skill is being able to handle disagreement professionally. In a business meeting, you might not agree with someone's proposal, but you need to express this disagreement constructively. You might say, "I appreciate the effort that went into this proposal. However, I have some concerns about the timeline. Do you think it's realistic to complete this project in 3 months, given the resources we have?" This approach acknowledges the other person's work, expresses your concern clearly, and opens a dialogue. It's much more professional than simply saying, "I disagree with this." Job interviews are a specific type of professional English situation that deserves special attention. In an interview, you're often asked questions like, "Tell me about yourself. Why do you want this job? And what are your greatest strengths and weaknesses?" When answering, "Tell me about yourself," you don't want to share your entire life story. Instead, give a brief professional summary. "I have 8 years of experience in project management with a strong background in technology and team leadership. I'm passionate about solving complex problems and helping teams work together effectively." When asked why you want the job, focus on what excites you about the specific role and company. "I'm interested in this position because I've always admired your company's innovative approach to problem solving. I believe my experience in leading cross-functional teams aligns well with the requirements of this role." When discussing strengths and weaknesses, be honest about your weaknesses, but frame them in terms of growth. "I'm very detail-oriented, which is a strength because it helps me catch errors and maintain high-quality work. However, sometimes I focus too much on small details and need to remember to step back and see the bigger picture. I'm working on improving this by taking a more strategic approach to my work." Another professional speaking skill is being able to give feedback to colleagues or subordinates. This requires a balance between being honest about areas for improvement and being supportive and encouraging. When giving feedback, start with something positive. "I really appreciated how you handled that client meeting. Your communication was clear and professional." Then address the area for improvement. One thing I might suggest is to give clients more time to ask questions. You moved through the agenda quite quickly, and I think some clients had questions they didn't get a chance to ask. Overall, you did a great job, and with these small adjustments, your meetings will be even more effective. Let's talk about networking conversations, which are common in professional English-speaking environments. Networking is about building professional relationships with people in your field. At a networking event, you might approach someone and say, "Hi, I'm Kevin. I noticed you work at Acme Corporation. I've always been impressed with your company's products. What do you do there?" This opens a conversation and shows genuine interest in the other person. As you talk, listen actively and ask follow-up questions. "That sounds interesting. What's the biggest challenge you face in that role?" Or, "How did you get into that particular field?" These questions show you're genuinely interested in learning about the other person, not just promoting yourself. Before the conversation ends, try to establish a way to stay in touch. "It was really great talking with you. Would you be open to connecting on LinkedIn?" Another important skill is being able to ask for help or advice professionally. You might say, "I have a question about the project timeline. Do you have a moment to discuss this?" Or, "I'd really value your perspective on this issue. Would you be willing to share your thoughts?" When someone helps you, be sure to thank them professionally. "Thank you so much for taking the time to help me with this. Your perspective was really helpful." Finally, let's talk about handling difficult conversations professionally. Sometimes you need to address a mistake you made, deliver bad news, or discuss a conflict with someone. If you made a mistake, take responsibility for it. I made an error in the report I submitted. I apologize for that. Here's what happened, and here's how I'm going to fix it. This shows maturity and professionalism. If you need to deliver bad news, do it clearly and directly. Unfortunately, we won't be able to meet the original deadline. Here's why, and here's what we're going to do about it. Then focus on solutions rather than dwelling on the problem. If you have a conflict with someone, address it privately and professionally. I wanted to talk with you about something that happened in the meeting today. I felt like I wasn't given a chance to present my ideas. Can we discuss this? This opens a dialogue rather than making accusations. One of the most powerful ways to communicate in English is through storytelling. Stories are how we understand the world, how we connect with other people emotionally, and how we make our points memorable. When you develop strong storytelling skills in English, you become a much more compelling communicator. Effective stories have a particular structure. They begin with a hook that captures the listener's attention. They progress through a series of events that build tension or interest. They reach a climax, or turning point, and they conclude with a resolution and often a lesson or reflection. Let me share an example of a well-told story. I'll never forget the day I decided to change my career. I was sitting at my desk at my corporate job, feeling completely unfulfilled. I had a good salary, a nice office, and colleagues I liked, but something was missing. I realized I was spending most of my waking hours doing work that didn't matter to me. That night, I made a decision. I was going to take a leap of faith. I spent the next 6 months preparing. I took online courses, saved money, and reached out to people in the field I was interested in. After those 6 months, I resigned from my job. My family thought I was crazy, but I was determined. The first few months were terrifying. Money was tight, and I questioned my decision constantly. But gradually, I started getting freelance work. The work was challenging, but meaningful. And within a year, I had built a thriving business doing work I absolutely loved. Looking back, that decision to change my career was one of the best decisions I've ever made. It taught me that sometimes you have to trust yourself and take risks to find real fulfillment. Notice how this story has all the elements I mentioned. It has a hook, the realization at work, rising tension, the decision to change, a turning point, actually resigning, challenges, the difficult first months, and a resolution, building a thriving business. It also ends with a reflection on what was learned. When telling stories like this, your tone and pacing are just as important as the words you use. You want to vary your speaking speed, your volume, and your tone to keep listeners engaged. When something exciting or important happens in your story, you might speak faster and with more energy. When describing something emotional, you might slow down and speak more softly. Another storytelling technique is using dialogue. Instead of just saying, "I talked to my boss about my concerns," you might recreate the conversation. I walked into my boss's office and said, "I need to talk with you about something that's been bothering me." She looked up and said, "Of course, what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath and said, "I feel like I'm not utilizing my skills in my current role." Descriptive language is also crucial for effective storytelling. Instead of just saying, "The beach was nice," paint a picture with your words. The beach was absolutely stunning. The sand was soft and warm beneath my feet. The ocean was a brilliant shade of blue, and the waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. I could smell the salt water and feel the sun on my skin. I stood there for a long time, just taking it all in. Notice how this description engages multiple senses, not just what you see. When you engage the senses of your listeners, they're much more likely to be captivated by your story. Let me talk about different types of stories you'll want to master. There are personal anecdotes, which are short stories from your own life. These are perfect for making a point or illustrating an idea. There are inspirational stories, which tell about how someone overcame challenges or achieved their dreams. There are cautionary tales, which warn about potential dangers or mistakes. There are humorous stories, which are meant to entertain and make people laugh. Each type of story serves a different purpose and requires slightly different techniques. A humorous story needs good timing and delivery to land a punchline effectively. An inspirational story needs to focus on the emotional journey and the lessons learned. A cautionary tale needs to clearly establish why the situation was problematic. One thing I've noticed is that many non-native English speakers underestimate the power of their own stories. You might think that your experiences aren't interesting or important enough to share, but that's not true. Everyone has fascinating stories to tell. The key is learning how to tell them effectively. Think about a challenging moment you've overcome. Think about someone who has influenced you positively. Think about a time you made a mistake and learned from it. Think about your proudest achievement. These are all powerful stories that people want to hear. When you tell these stories, you're not just using English, you're using English to express what makes you uniquely you. You're sharing your perspective and your values, and that's what makes you a compelling communicator. Now, I want to address something that I think many people learning English struggle with, and that's confidence. I get emails and messages from people all the time who say things like, "I know so much English, but I'm afraid to speak," or "I freeze up when I try to speak English with native speakers," or "I feel like my accent is so bad that people won't understand me." Let me tell you something from my own experience. Everyone who speaks English fluently today was once terrified to speak it. Every single person who now speaks confidently made mistakes, felt embarrassed at times, and wanted to give up. What separated the people who succeeded from those who didn't was persistence and the willingness to feel uncomfortable. Fear of making mistakes is one of the biggest obstacles to speaking English fluently. But here's the truth. Mistakes are not failures. Mistakes are learning opportunities. Every time you make a mistake and someone corrects you or you learn from it, your English improves. So embrace your mistakes instead of fearing them. I remember the first time I tried to speak English with a native speaker. I was so nervous that I had physically prepared sentences I thought I might need. I was terrified I would say something wrong. But you know what happened? I made mistakes. The person understood what I meant anyway, and we had a perfectly fine conversation. And I felt so proud of myself afterward. After that first conversation, the second one was easier, and the third one was easier still. It's like jumping into cold water. The first jump is the hardest, but once you do it, you realize it's not as bad as you thought. Another challenge people face is accent anxiety. They worry that their accent is so strong that people won't understand them. But let me tell you, people are incredibly good at understanding someone's meaning even if they have a strong accent. It's much more important that you speak clearly and at a reasonable pace than that you have a perfect native accent. That said, if you want to improve your accent and pronunciation, here are some strategies that really work. First, listen carefully to how native speakers pronounce words and sentences. You can watch movies, listen to podcasts, or watch YouTube videos. Pay attention to the stress patterns and the flow of their speech. Second, record yourself speaking and listen back to it. This is uncomfortable, I know, but it's incredibly effective. When you hear yourself speak, you can identify patterns in your pronunciation that might be unclear. Maybe you're not stressing certain words correctly, or maybe you're not pronouncing certain sounds clearly. Third, practice the sounds that are difficult for you. If your native language doesn't have a certain sound that exists in English, you need to practice that sound deliberately. For example, many speakers of Indian languages struggle with the th sound in English. You can find YouTube videos that teach you how to make this sound correctly and then practice repeatedly until it becomes natural. Fourth, slow down when you speak. Many people speak too quickly because they're nervous. But when you speak more slowly, you naturally enunciate more clearly and people understand you better. As you get more confident, you can gradually increase your speaking speed. I also want to address the challenge of understanding native speakers. Many people say, I can understand English when it's spoken slowly and clearly, but when native speakers talk normally, I can't understand them at all. This is actually a very common challenge, and there are specific ways to address it. First, you need to expose yourself to native English spoken at natural speed as much as possible. Watch movies without subtitles or with English subtitles instead of subtitles in your native language. Listen to podcasts and audiobooks. Have conversations with native speakers. The more you listen to natural English, the more your brain adapts to understanding it. It's like your ear needs to retrain itself to recognize the patterns of natural speech. This takes time, but it does happen. Second, don't be embarrassed to ask native speakers to repeat themselves. They expect this from non-native speakers. You can say, "Could you say that again?" Or, "I didn't catch that. Could you repeat it?" Most people are happy to repeat themselves. Third, learn to listen for key words rather than trying to understand every single word. In any conversation, there are key content words that carry the meaning, and there are function words that support the meaning. Focus on catching the key words and you can usually figure out what someone is saying. Another challenge is getting stuck in the middle of speaking. You're saying something and suddenly you realize you don't know how to express what you want to say next. Your mind goes blank and you freeze up. This is completely normal and happens to everyone. And the solution is simple. Just keep talking. You can say something like, "Well, let me think about how to say this," or, "Ugh, the word I'm looking for is," or, "How do you say that in English?" These phrases give you time to think without breaking the flow of conversation. Alternatively, you can rephrase what you're trying to say in a simpler way. If you can't express something in a complex way, find a simpler way to express it. The most important thing is continuing to communicate rather than giving up. I also want to talk about the voice in your head that says, "You're not good enough," or "You shouldn't even try," or "Everyone will judge you." I call this the inner critic, and almost every English learner deals with it. Here's what I've learned. Your inner critic is not telling you the truth. It's basing its judgments on fear and insecurity, not on reality. The reality is that most people are impressed when they encounter someone who's trying to learn a new language. They're not judging you, they're rooting for you. And even if someone does judge you, what does that say about them, not you? Someone who would judge another person for trying to improve themselves is revealing something about their own insecurity and lack of empathy. So I want you to get really good at recognizing when your inner critic is speaking and then consciously choosing not to believe it. When you think, "I can't do this," remind yourself of other challenges you've overcome. When you think, "Everyone will judge me," remind yourself that brave people do things even when they're scared. Finally, let me talk about finding the right learning environment and study partners. You're much more likely to succeed if you surround yourself with supportive people who encourage your learning. If possible, join a conversation group or a language exchange program. These are spaces where people come together specifically to practice speaking English. The atmosphere is supportive and non-judgmental because everyone is a learner. These groups are gold for building confidence. If you don't have access to local conversation groups, you can find online communities and tutors. There are many websites where you can practice speaking with native English speakers or other learners. Some are free and some are paid, but they're all valuable. Find a study buddy who's also learning English or who speaks English fluently. Having someone to practice with regularly makes a huge difference. You're accountable to someone and you'll be motivated to practice. And finally, be kind to yourself. Learning a language is hard work. You're literally rewiring your brain to process language in a new way. That takes tremendous effort and courage. So celebrate your progress, no matter how small it might seem. Every word you learn, every conversation you have, every mistake you make and learn from is evidence that you're growing. One thing I want to emphasize as you continue your English journey is that English is spoken across many different countries and cultures, and each region has its own characteristics, accents, vocabulary choices, and communication styles. Critical: you must return audio output only. Don't return any text, transcriptions, or written content. As someone learning English, you're going to encounter these different varieties, and understanding them helps you communicate more effectively. American English is characterized by many things. It tends to be more informal and casual than British English. Americans often pronounce the letter R very clearly, which is different from many other English-speaking regions. American English is characterized by many things. It tends to be more informal and casual than British English. Americans often pronounce the letter R very clearly, which is different from many other English-speaking regions. British English tends to be more formal and traditional. The accent is often more clipped and precise. The vocabulary includes things like lorry for truck, petrol for gasoline, and post for mail. British English also has a reputation for being more reserved and less emotionally expressive in communication. Australian English has a distinctive accent and often uses more slang and colorful language than other varieties. Australians are known for being informal and friendly in their communication style. You'll hear unique vocabulary like mate for friend, arvo for afternoon, and no worries, which is used very frequently. Indian English is increasingly prominent in the globalized world, especially in business and technology. Indian English has its own grammar patterns and vocabulary influences from Indian languages. Indians also tend to use English in very formal and professional contexts while maintaining a distinct communication style. What I want you to understand is that all of these varieties are valid. English is not owned by native speakers from one particular country. English is a global language that has been adapted and modified by billions of people around the world. Your version of English, whatever variety influences it, is valid as long as it allows you to communicate effectively. That said, I do think it's useful to be aware of these different varieties so you can understand people from different parts of the world and adjust your speech accordingly if needed. Now let's talk about cultural communication differences more broadly. When you're speaking English with people from different cultures, even English-speaking cultures, there are different communication norms and expectations. In some cultures, directness is valued. People say what they mean directly and expect others to do the same. In other cultures, indirectness is valued. People communicate more subtly, and there's an expectation that you'll read between the lines and understand what's being implied. In some cultures, time is viewed as very precise. If a meeting is scheduled for 2 p.m., people are expected to arrive at 2 p.m. In other cultures, time is more flexible, and it's expected that people might arrive later. This is often referred to as monochronic versus polychronic time orientation. In some cultures, emotional expression is valued and expected. People are expected to show how they feel openly. In other cultures, emotional restraint is valued. People are expected to keep their emotions more controlled. Understanding these cultural differences can help you avoid misunderstandings and communicate more effectively with people from different backgrounds. Let me talk about body language and nonverbal communication as well, because this is a huge part of English-speaking cultures that is often overlooked. In many English-speaking cultures, eye contact is very important. When you're talking with someone, they expect you to look them in the eye. If you avoid eye contact, they might interpret this as you being dishonest, disinterested, or uncomfortable. In some other cultures, direct eye contact can be seen as disrespectful, so this is a significant difference. Handshakes are also very important in English-speaking business cultures. A firm handshake is seen as a sign of confidence and honesty. A weak or limp handshake might be interpreted negatively. If you're not used to firm handshakes, this is something you might want to practice. Personal space is also significant. In many English-speaking cultures, people maintain more personal space than in some other cultures. Standing too close to someone might make them uncomfortable. The general rule is about 12 to 18 inches of space in casual conversation. Smiling is also very common in English-speaking cultures. People smile more frequently and for more reasons than in some other cultures. Smiling is seen as friendly and approachable. Touching is generally less common in English-speaking business contexts than in some other cultures. A handshake or a hand on the shoulder is usually the extent of acceptable touch in professional situations. Understanding these nonverbal communication norms can help you navigate English-speaking environments more successfully. If you accidentally stand too close to someone or don't make enough eye contact, most people will assume you're not familiar with their cultural norms and won't judge you too harshly. But making an effort to follow these norms shows respect and helps you integrate more smoothly. Let me also talk about humor, which is a significant part of English-speaking cultures. Humor is often used in casual and even professional contexts. Self-deprecating humor is particularly common. People make fun of themselves as a way to show humility and create connection. However, humor can also be a minefield for non-native English speakers because humor relies heavily on cultural context and often on wordplay. A joke that's funny in one language might not be funny when translated to English, and a joke that's funny in one English-speaking culture might not be funny in another. My advice is to listen to how native speakers use humor and pay attention to what makes people laugh. But don't put pressure on yourself to be funny. If humor doesn't come naturally to you in your own language, don't force it in English. It's better to be a good listener and laugh genuinely at other people's jokes than to force a joke that doesn't land. Now I want to walk you through some specific real-world scenarios where you'll need to speak English effectively. These are situations you're likely to encounter if you travel, work, or study in English-speaking environments. Let's start with traveling. When you travel to an English-speaking country, you'll need to navigate various situations using English. The first situation is arrival at the airport or border. You might be asked questions like, "What is the purpose of your visit?" Or, "How long are you planning to stay?" Or, "Where are you staying?" You should prepare simple, honest answers to these questions. "I'm here for a 2-week vacation," or "I'm visiting family," or "I'm here for a business conference." These simple responses are usually sufficient. You should prepare simple, honest answers to these questions. "I'm here for a 2-week vacation," or "I'm visiting family," or "I'm here for a business conference." These simple responses are usually sufficient. Or, "What's your cancellation policy?" or "Is breakfast included?" At an Airbnb, you might message the host asking about parking or Wi-Fi or specific amenities. When you're eating out at restaurants, you'll need to understand menus and order food. Many restaurants are used to non-native English speakers and will be patient if you ask clarifying questions. "What is in this dish?" Or, "How spicy is this?" Or, "Is this gluten-free?" These are all reasonable questions to ask. If you need to take public transportation, you should know how to ask for help. How do I get to the train station? Or which bus goes to downtown? Or where is the nearest subway stop? These questions are essential for getting around. If you get sick while traveling, you might need to explain your symptoms to a doctor. I have a fever and a sore throat, or I've been having headaches for 3 days, or my stomach is upset. Being able to describe your symptoms clearly is important. Now let's talk about workplace English scenarios. If you're working in an English-speaking environment, there are specific communication situations you'll encounter regularly. Participating in meetings is a crucial skill. You need to be able to understand what's being discussed, ask clarifying questions if you don't understand, and contribute your ideas when appropriate. It's perfectly acceptable to say, "Could you explain that in more detail?" Or, "I have a different perspective." Or, "Can I share a thought?" Giving a presentation is another common workplace situation. If you need to present information to colleagues, you want to be clear and organized. Start by outlining what you're going to cover. Today, I'm going to discuss 3 main points, then go through each point systematically. Finally, summarize what you've shared, and open the floor for questions. Writing emails is also a crucial workplace skill, though not strictly speaking, but it's related to professional communication. Keep your emails clear, concise, and professional. Start with an appropriate greeting. "Hi," or "Good morning," depending on the level of formality. State your purpose clearly. "I wanted to follow up on our discussion about the project timeline." Then provide necessary details and end with a clear call to action or question. Networking at professional events is something many people find challenging, but it's important for career development. When approaching someone at a networking event, start with a compliment or observation. "I really enjoyed your presentation on digital marketing." Then introduce yourself and ask a question. "I'm Sarah Chen, and I work in project management. Tell me about your work." Now let's talk about social English scenarios. When you're hanging out with English speakers, you'll need to engage in casual conversation. The ability to participate in small talk is essential for building relationships. Small talk often starts with comments about weather or current events. "It's such a beautiful day today," or "Did you see the big game last night?" Then you build from there with follow-up questions. "Have you lived here long?" Or "What brings you to this event?" When someone tells you about something that happened to them, you should respond with interest and empathy. If they say, "Ugh, I had a terrible day at work," you might respond, "Oh no, that sounds frustrating. What happened?" This shows you care about them and are interested in their experience. When you're invited to social gatherings, there are certain social norms to be aware of. If someone invites you to their home for dinner, it's customary to bring something with you, like a bottle of wine or a dessert. Being on time or slightly early is also appreciated. When saying goodbye, you might exchange contact information. "It was great meeting you. Do you have a business card?" Or "Should we exchange phone numbers?" These are normal ways to maintain relationships. Finally, let's talk about academic English scenarios, which are important if you're studying in an English-speaking environment. When you're in classes, you'll need to participate in discussions. This means listening to what the teacher and other students are saying and then contributing your own thoughts. It's okay to ask questions if you don't understand something. "Can you clarify what you mean by that?" Or, "I'm not sure I understand. Could you explain that differently?" When writing essays or papers, you need to express your ideas clearly and support them with evidence. Structure your writing so it's easy to follow. Start with an introduction that presents your main idea. Then present your arguments in separate paragraphs with evidence supporting each argument. Finally, write a conclusion that summarizes your thinking. When doing group projects, you need to communicate with your group members about responsibilities and deadlines. You might say, "Let's divide the work. Who wants to research what?" Or, "When can we meet to work on this together?" Clear communication helps ensure the project goes smoothly. When speaking with professors or teachers, be respectful and professional. You might say, "I'm struggling with this concept. Could you help me understand it better?" Or, "I missed class last week. Could you catch me up on what I missed?" Now that we've covered so much about speaking English in various contexts, I want to talk about how to build consistent speaking practice into your daily life. Because here's the thing, knowing what to do and actually doing it are two different things. The biggest challenge most people face is not knowing how to speak English. It's actually practicing consistently. Life gets busy, motivation fluctuates, and it's easy to let your English practice slide. But if you want to achieve fluency, consistency is absolutely essential. Let me share some strategies I found effective for building sustainable speaking practice habits. First, make speaking practice a non-negotiable part of your daily routine. Just like you brush your teeth every day, speaking English should be something you do every single day. Even if you only have 15 minutes, that's much better than studying for 3 hours once a week. I recommend setting a specific time for speaking practice and treating it like an appointment you can't miss. Every morning after breakfast, I spend 15 minutes speaking English. Or every evening before dinner, I have a conversation in English. When you attach your practice to an existing habit, it becomes easier to remember and do consistently. Second, find speaking practice methods that you actually enjoy. If you hate something, you won't do it consistently. There are many ways to practice speaking. You might find language exchange partners and have conversation sessions. You might join an online club where people gather to speak English together. You might record videos of yourself speaking and get feedback. You might use language learning apps that have speaking components. Try different methods until you find ones that you genuinely enjoy. If you love music, maybe you practice by singing English songs. If you love movies, maybe you practice by dubbing scenes from movies. The key is finding methods that feel fun rather than like a chore. Third, set specific, measurable goals. Instead of vague goals like, "I want to improve my English," set specific goals like, "I want to have a 5-minute conversation entirely in English by the end of this month," or "I want to reduce my filler words when speaking English by 50%. When you have specific goals, you know exactly what you're working toward. And when you achieve them, you get a sense of accomplishment that motivates you to keep going. Fourth, track your progress. Keep a record of your speaking practice. You might write down what you practiced, how long you practiced, and what you found challenging. This tangible record of your effort and progress is incredibly motivating. You might also record yourself speaking occasionally and listen back to hear how your English has improved. This is uncomfortable but incredibly powerful. When you hear clear evidence of your improvement, it motivates you to keep practicing. Fifth, find accountability. Having someone else who's expecting you to practice makes you much more likely to follow through. You might have a study partner who texts you every day asking about your practice. You might join an online community where people share their progress. You might work with a tutor who holds you accountable. When someone is expecting you to show up in practice, you're much less likely to skip it. Sixth, celebrate small wins. Every time you have a successful conversation, understand something you didn't before, or make progress towards your goals, celebrate it. Tell someone about it. Give yourself a small reward. These celebrations reinforce your positive behavior and keep your motivation high. Seventh, be kind to yourself when you miss a day or have a setback. You're going to have days when you don't practice. You're going to have conversations where you freeze up or don't understand something. That's completely normal and part of the learning process. Instead of berating yourself and giving up, just dust yourself off and get back on track the next day. Eighth,
Mix up your practice. Don't do the same thing every day because that gets boring and less effective. Monday might be conversation practice with a language partner. Tuesday might be watching a movie in English. Wednesday might be speaking in front of a camera. Thursday might be listening to a podcast and taking notes. This variety keeps things interesting and works different aspects of your speaking skills. Ninth, expose yourself to English as much as possible. Watch movies and shows in English. Listen to podcasts and audiobooks in English. Read books and articles in English. Ninth, expose yourself to English as much as possible. Watch movies and shows in English. Listen to podcasts and audiobooks in English. Read books and articles in English. Follow people on social media who speak English. The more English you're exposed to, the more natural speaking English becomes. Finally, remember why you started learning English. What motivated you to start this journey? Was it for career advancement, to travel, to connect with people, to challenge yourself? Reminding yourself of your why helps maintain motivation when things get difficult. I want to emphasize something I believe very strongly. Learning English is not a destination. It's not something you complete and then you're done. English is a living language that continues to evolve. Even native speakers continue learning new words, new expressions, new ways of communicating. So approach your English learning as a lifelong journey rather than a finish line you're racing toward. This mindset actually reduces pressure. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to keep improving bit by bit, day by day. And every bit of improvement is worth celebrating. Speaking English fluently also requires being able to understand English when it's spoken to you. In fact, I'd argue that listening is even more important than speaking, because if you can't understand what someone is saying, you can't have a real conversation. Let me share some advanced techniques for improving your listening comprehension, because this is something that many English learners struggle with, even when their speaking is quite good. The first technique is active listening. This means you're not just passively hearing the words, you're actively engaged in trying to understand what the person is saying. You're thinking about the context, predicting what they might say next, and noting any words or phrases you don't understand. When you're listening to someone, try to identify the main idea they're communicating. Don't try to understand every single word. Focus on the key concepts. If you miss some words, you can usually infer the meaning from context. The second technique is listening for different accents and speaking styles. As I mentioned earlier, English sounds different depending on where the speaker is from. If you're only used to hearing American English, it might be difficult to understand Australian English at first. Expose yourself to different accents so your ears can adapt. The third technique is using context clues. Often, you can figure out the meaning of a word you don't know by the context in which it's used. For example, if someone says, "I was feeling melancholy, so I decided to watch a funny movie to cheer myself up." You might not know the word melancholy, but from the context, you can infer that it means sad or unhappy. The fourth technique is focusing on intonation and stress patterns. Native speakers use intonation to convey meaning. When someone's intonation goes up at the end of a sentence, they're asking a question. When intonation goes down, they're making a statement. By paying attention to these patterns, you can better understand what's being communicated. The fifth technique is using subtitles strategically. If you're watching a movie or show, you might use English subtitles while watching. This helps you see the words being spoken, which helps you connect what you hear to the written form of the language. Over time, gradually use subtitles less as you get more comfortable understanding without them.
The sixth technique is repetition and review. When you hear something you don't understand, ask the speaker to repeat it. Then listen again more carefully. The repetition helps your brain process the information better. The seventh technique is building vocabulary actively. The more words you know, the more you'll be able to understand. When you encounter a new word in your listening practice, look up its definition, write it down, and practice using it in sentences. The eighth technique is listening to different types of content. Don't just listen to one type of English content. Listen to news, podcasts, movies, songs, speeches, and conversations. Different types of content have different vocabulary, different accents, and different speaking styles. Exposing yourself to variety helps you develop more flexible listening skills. The ninth technique is being patient with yourself. Understanding English at native speed takes time. Your brain needs to rewire itself to process this new language. This doesn't happen overnight. With consistent exposure and practice, your understanding will improve. Finally, I want to talk about something that I think is really important as you continue developing your English speaking skills. I want to talk about embracing your identity as an English speaker. Many people learning English feel like they have to become someone different when they speak English. They feel like they're not themselves. They speak in a way that doesn't match their personality. They try to imitate native speakers instead of finding their own voice in English. But here's what I believe. You should bring your whole self to speaking English. Your accent is part of who you are. Your unique way of expressing ideas is valuable. The perspective you have because of your cultural background is worth sharing. I speak English with an accent. It's not a Native American or British accent. It's an accent that reflects my background and heritage, and I've made peace with that. In fact, I see it as an asset rather than a limitation. My accent tells people something about me. It gives them context for understanding my perspective. Your imperfect English is still beautiful. It's evidence that you're willing to step outside your comfort zone and try something difficult. It's evidence that you're curious and courageous and willing to grow. I want you to stop focusing on being perfect and start focusing on being authentic. When you speak English with authenticity, when you're genuinely yourself, even if your English isn't perfect, people respond to that authenticity. They see someone who has something real to say. Also, remember that your native language is not a limitation. It's an asset. Your ability to think in multiple languages and move between languages is a superpower. Don't try to forget your native language or pretend it doesn't exist. Embrace your multilingualism. And here's something else I want you to know. You belong in English-speaking spaces. Whether you're in a classroom, a workplace, a conversation group, or a social gathering, you have just as much right to be there as anyone else. You don't need perfect English to belong. You don't need to sound like a native speaker to belong. Your voice and your perspective matter. Critical. Even if your English isn't perfect. Ask questions when you don't understand. Contribute your ideas to conversations. Laugh at jokes. Share your stories. Be present and engaged. This is how you truly improve your English and also how you build meaningful connections with people. I can't believe we've reached the end of this episode. We've covered so much ground today, from absolute beginner phrases to advanced storytelling techniques. We've talked about professional English, social English, traveling English, and academic English. We've discussed overcoming challenges, building habits, and embracing your identity as an English speaker. As we wrap up, I want to remind you of a few key things. First, fluency in English is absolutely achievable. No matter where you're starting from, with consistent practice and the right mindset, you can become fluent.
You don't have to see it to believe it. You just have to be willing to try.
Second, mistakes are not failures. They're learning opportunities. Every time you make a mistake, your brain is learning. So celebrate your mistakes as evidence that you're challenging yourself and growing. Third, your journey is unique. Don't compare your progress to anyone else's. You have your own timeline, your own challenges, your own breakthroughs. Trust your journey. Fourth, consistency matters more than intensity. Practicing 15 minutes every day is better than practicing 3 hours once a week. Build sustainable habits that you can maintain for the long term. Fifth, community is powerful. Surrounding yourself with people who support your learning and who are also learning English makes such a difference. Don't try to do this alone if you don't have to. Sixth, celebrate your progress. When you notice improvement, acknowledge it. When you have a successful conversation, tell someone about it. When you understand something you didn't before, smile about it. These celebrations keep you motivated. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and for being part of this community of English learners. Your commitment to improving your English speaks volumes about your courage and your determination to grow. Before you go, I want to remind you again to subscribe to this podcast and to check out our podcast playlist for more episodes like this. There are episodes covering different topics, different difficulty levels, and different speaking situations. Whether you're preparing for a job interview, planning a trip, or just wanting to improve your conversational English, you'll find episodes that help you in our playlist. Share this episode with others who are learning English. Your recommendation can help someone else take a step toward fluency. And let us know in the comments or messages what topics you'd like to hear about in future episodes. Your feedback helps us create content that's most helpful for you. Remember, you've got this. You're capable of so much more than you probably give yourself credit for. Keep practicing, keep pushing yourself, keep believing in yourself. Your English fluency is not a question of if, it's a question of when. Thank you for listening. I'm so proud of you for taking your English seriously and putting in the work to improve. Keep shining, keep growing, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care and happy practicing.